You who are watching this, pause for a moment. This is not just another Holy Week. This is your chance to truly experience the deepest mystery of our faith, the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But to live it fully, it's not enough to simply pray or attend a ceremony. Your attitude, your sense of reverence, your humility, even your clothing speak louder than 1,000 words. What you wear reveals what's inside your heart. In this video, you'll understand why the way you dress during these sacred days is not just a minor detail, but a direct reflection of your soul. Do you believe appearances don't matter? I want you to tell me at the end, because I promise, after this, you'll see it differently. What clothing should not be worn during Holy Week? I ask you to think about this seriously and humbly. Holy Week is not a show. It's not a fashion event or an opportunity to draw attention to yourself. It is a sacred time, a moment of deep reflection in which we accompany Christ in his total self-giving. You are not here to simply observe. You are here to participate, to make an interior journey. That's why everything you do, including how you dress, should be consistent with that path. There are styles of clothing which, even if normalized by society, are not compatible with the spirit of these holy days. Not because someone wants to impose a code on you, but because there is a spiritual truth we must embrace with maturity. Some garments distract, some scandalize, and some make it harder, not easier, for you and those around you to enter into the mystery of faith. The first thing you should avoid is provocative or overly sensual clothing. In today's world, shaped so heavily by fashion and distorted beauty standards, it's common to see tight clothes, deep necklines, very short skirts, or unnecessary transparency. But you need to understand something. This doesn't build anyone up. It doesn't help. And as a believer, you're called to build up, not to confuse. Maybe you feel good in certain outfits. Maybe you see nothing wrong with them. But pause for a moment and ask yourself, does this clothing help me keep a spirit of reverence, or does it place me at the center of attention? Does this way of dressing invite others to look at Christ, or just to look at me? This is not a judgment against you. It is a call to deeper awareness. We live in a culture that has lost the sense of modesty, that treats the human body as a product, a tool for attention. But you do not belong to that logic. Your worth doesn't lie in what you show, but in who you are. Your body was not made to provoke others' desires. It was made to glorify God. In these holy days, even your clothing choices should become an offering. Dressing with modesty is a concrete and silent way of saying, Lord, I want you to shine, not me. You should also pay attention to what your clothes communicate through symbols, images, or phrases. Some clothing displays messages that directly contradict the gospel. T-shirts with crude or mocking slogans, with double meanings. Logos that promote a culture of excess, meaningless sexuality, or violence. Graphics that glorify chaos, drugs, or death. Maybe you've never seen it that way, but wearing these kinds of clothes during Holy Week is like walking into church yelling, playing loud music, or bringing in distractions. It simply doesn't belong. Instead of helping you enter the sacred, it pulls you away. Instead of encouraging prayer, it disrupts it. Even small details matter. Maybe that t-shirt just has a funny phrase, but if that phrase carries sarcasm, vulgarity, or disrespect, it's not harmless. Maybe that logo is just part of a trendy brand, but if it reflects values that oppose your faith, then ask yourself, why am I wearing this? Faith is also expressed through signs, and you are called to be a living sign of the kingdom. You cannot represent Christ with your words and, at the same time, perhaps without realizing it, promote the opposite through your clothing. I want you to consider another extreme that should also be avoided: ostentation. There are people who don't fall into provocation, but instead into vanity. Expensive clothes, flashy jewelry, heavy makeup, outfits meant to stand out more than to reflect reverence. In a culture that often measures worth by appearances, dressing luxuriously might seem normal. But during Holy Week, that has no place. These days are not for displaying wealth, but for showing poverty of spirit. Not to draw attention to yourself, but to redirect attention to the crucified one. Expensive clothing worn with an attitude of vanity becomes an obstacle. You might not mean it that way, but think about the message it sends. Are you here to walk with Jesus in his suffering, or to highlight your image? Are you here to serve, or to be seen? Christ walked to Calvary stripped of everything, not adorned. He was reduced to nothing, humiliated. And you, if you truly follow him, are also called to walk in that same direction. There is no coherence between excessive luxury and the cross. There is no coherence between heavy makeup and the bloodied face of Christ. I know this message might make you uncomfortable, but sometimes the truth is uncomfortable, not to hurt, but to heal, not to shame, but to awaken. And so, with respect and love, I invite you to examine how you dress during these sacred days. Not like someone checking off a list of rules, but like someone looking deeply into their heart and asking, am I living this with authenticity? Am I allowing even my clothing to be an act of faith? Why should we avoid this kind of clothing? You, who long to live your faith authentically, who desire to walk with Christ and follow him truly. Pause for a moment and reflect on this. Why is it so important to avoid certain styles of clothing during Holy Week? This isn't just about external rules or empty traditions. This is something deeper, something spiritual. It has everything to do with your relationship with God, with others, and with yourself. The way you dress during these days carries a weight you may not have considered. It's not a whim, and it's not an exaggeration. It's a tangible expression of the respect you have for what is sacred, for your neighbor, and for the testimony your life gives to the world. First, think about the impact your appearance can have on others. Faith is not lived in isolation. We are part of one body, one community, and our actions influence those around us, often without us even realizing it. Dressing in a provocative, flashy, or attention-seeking way during a time of reflection doesn't only affect your own spiritual experience. It can also become a distraction or even a stumbling block for others. In a liturgical celebration, a procession, or during the veneration of the cross, you should not be the focus. And yet, sometimes, a single inappropriate outfit is enough to break the sacred silence, divert people's attention, and wound the sensitivity of someone who is trying to pray. Maybe it's not intentional. Maybe you think everyone should be responsible for how they react or what they look at. But that would ignore a central truth of the gospel. We are responsible for one another. Jesus said, "Woe to the one who causes one of these little ones to stumble." Scandal isn't just about causing a major crisis of faith. It's also about putting unnecessary obstacles in someone else's spiritual path, making it harder for them to pray, to focus, to understand the sacred. In an age where appearances dominate everything, you are called to be different, not through long speeches, but through acts of love. And sometimes, love shows itself in something as simple as dressing modestly out of consideration for others. Then there is the dimension of the mystery itself. Holy Week is not just another holiday. It's not just another cultural event on the calendar. It is the very heart of Christianity. This is the time when the Son of God humbles himself, gives himself up, allows himself to be judged, scourged, crucified for you. So how can you come before such a mystery with superficiality? How can you take part in the Stations of the Cross, in the silence of Holy Saturday, in the Passion of the Lord, while wearing clothes that speak of vanity, carelessness, or distraction? It would be like walking onto sacred ground without removing your shoes, like laughing at a funeral, like showing up to a wedding without knowing who's getting married. This isn't about rules. It's about understanding the moment you're living. The suffering of Christ is not a spectacle. It is love, carried to its absolute limit. And the least you can do is respond with respect, with reverence, with solemnity. Your body, your presence, your demeanor, all of you, should be aligned with the gravity and the beauty of this sacred time. That includes how you dress. There is no room for triviality. There is no room for carelessness. Everything speaks, even a blouse that's cut too low, makeup that draws attention, or a designer label that screams luxury. On the cross, Christ stripped himself of everything. And you, Are you willing to strip away your style to embrace the Spirit? Don't forget this. Your life is a message. And most of the time, that message isn't spoken, it's lived. It's found in your daily choices, in what you wear, in how you carry yourself. Your clothing is part of your personal language. It's the first thing others see. And during Holy Week, that visual message takes on particular power. If those who see you at church, on the street, or at a vigil notice that there is coherence between your faith and your appearance, then you are evangelizing. You are showing them Christ. But if there is contradiction, if your words say one thing and your appearance says another, then your witness loses its strength. It becomes blurred, confused. Living a coherent faith is not easy. It takes courage. It requires swimming against the current. It calls you to look beyond what everyone else is doing and ask yourself honestly, does this honor God? Does this help others? Does this help me live with more faith? Dressing modestly isn't oppression. It's freedom. It's choosing out of love. It's declaring with your body, I know my worth. I know who I follow. And I know what this moment means. So I invite you to examine not just your closet, but your attitude. Because your outward appearance can either be a sincere reflection of your inner self, or a mask. You decide. Holy Week offers you a path of truth, of simplicity, of real encounter with the Lord. Don't let something as small as the wrong outfit take you away from that depth. Stand before Christ and ask Him, Lord, how do you want me to present myself before you? And let Him be the one who guides you. Not fashion, not social pressure, not your reflection in the mirror. What clothing is recommended during Holy Week? If you truly want to live Holy Week with depth and reverence, you must understand that every gesture matters, including how you dress. If you've already come to see that not everything the world calls normal is suitable for this sacred time, then the next step is to humbly ask yourself, how should I dress? This isn't about turning your faith into an aesthetic rule or becoming obsessed with appearances. It's not about measuring your spirituality by the length of a skirt or the cut of a shirt. It's about dressing with awareness, with intention, with an attitude that expresses reverence, respect, and genuine inner readiness. When you come before God in the liturgy, when you walk in a procession or kneel before the altar in a vigil, you are stepping into a sacred space and time. That's why what you wear should reflect that reverence. You don't need anything expensive or elaborate. In fact, the most appropriate clothing is often the simplest. Muted colors like black, gray, white, brown, or purple are not arbitrary suggestions. They reflect the spiritual tone of these holy days. They are not sad colors, as some might think, but tones that invite silence, introspection, and soul-level companionship with Christ in His Passion. Purple, for example, is a sign of penance and preparation. White speaks of purity and the light of the resurrection. Black reflects sacred mourning before the Lord's death. Wearing these is not about following a trend. It's a way of tuning in spiritually. This isn't about becoming rigid or expressionless, but about allowing even the colors you wear to speak of what's happening in your soul. Clothing can be a bridge or a barrier, and you want it to be a bridge to the mystery. Modesty also plays a key role. It's not enough to choose the right color if the shape or style of the clothing contradicts the spirit of reverence. Wear clothes that are both comfortable and modest. A plain shirt, simple pants, or a long dress that doesn't unnecessarily expose the body. Not because you have to hide, but because you're not there to draw attention to yourself. You're there to adore. You're there to contemplate the greatest love. And that is also shown in covering your shoulders, avoiding sheer fabrics, and protecting both your own dignity and that of others. When you enter a church, remember that you're entering the house of the Lord. Just as you wouldn't walk into a job interview or a formal ceremony wearing just anything, you shouldn't do so here either. Not because of appearances, but out of respect. This is not just any place. Here, heaven touches the earth. Here, the sacrifice of Christ becomes present. And you want to be worthy of that. Not out of obligation, but out of love. If you're going to take part in processions or vigils, there's a small but meaningful detail that is often overlooked. wearing garments that help foster inner stillness. A scarf, a light veil, a simple mantle. These are not empty accessories. They can be tools to help you focus, to block out external noise, to enter into deeper silence. Some might see this as old-fashioned, but in reality, it's an ancient and meaningful gesture. Covering oneself as someone who steps away from the noise to gaze upon God without distraction, as someone who separates for a moment from the world to be alone with Him. Also, think about the communal dimension. When you dress with sobriety, you help others too. Without saying a word, you remind them that this is a sacred moment. You invite them to be still, to pray, to look at Christ. You become a sign, a quiet testimony that might inspire others to do the same. You never know how many people, upon seeing you dressed with dignity and reverence, might feel drawn to come closer to God. Goodness is contagious. Just as disorder spreads, so does grace. You can be a vessel of order, of inner beauty, of peace. There's no need to spend money or wear liturgical garments. All you need is willingness. A heart that longs to live these days with integrity will naturally want to dress with reverence. Don't worry about what people might say. Don't give in to social pressure. Sometimes, dressing modestly and simply in a culture obsessed with appearances is a prophetic act, a way of saying with your body, I belong to Christ, and these days are sacred to me. There are some who think that faith is only a matter of the heart, that as long as you feel good inside, the outward things don't matter. But that's not the case. God, who created us body and soul, does not separate the visible from the invisible. We are whole beings, and our spirituality is not lived only through what we feel or think, but also through what we do, how we speak, how we carry ourselves, and yes, even how we dress. You cannot come to commemorate the Passion of Christ wearing the same clothes you would wear to a party or the gym. Because if you do, deep down, you're saying you haven't truly understood what you're living. This is not about imposing strict rules or judging anyone. It's about recovering something that has been gradually lost in today's world: modesty. And I'm not speaking of a repression of the body, as if the body were something shameful. On the contrary, the body is a wonder, a creation of God, a temple of the Holy Spirit. And precisely because of that, it deserves to be treated with respect. Christian modesty is not an act of shame, but of dignity. It is a silent language that proclaims, my worth is not in showing myself off, but in who I am within. When you choose to dress with simplicity, sobriety, and care, you're sending a message to the world. You're saying, I am here for something sacred. Holy Week is not just any moment, and your clothing shouldn't be either. What you wear can strengthen your prayer, or weaken it. It can help others enter into a spirit of reverence, or distract them. It can be a sign of humility, or of vanity. Do you see? This is not just about style. It is something profoundly spiritual. Because faith is never lived in isolation. We are a community. What you do, what you show, affects those around you. When you walk into a church, when you take part in a procession, when you're present in a liturgical celebration, you're bearing witness. Even if you don't say a single word, your presence already communicates something. That's why your clothing also evangelizes, or scandalizes. It can lift the gaze of another toward heaven, or pull it down toward superficial things. Choose wisely. Throughout the history of the church, the saints understood this truth clearly. They never saw modesty as a burden, but as an expression of true freedom. They knew that by dressing simply, they were not hiding anything. They were revealing the most beautiful part of themselves, their soul. Today, you are called to do the same. To be a sign for a world that desperately needs light. In a time when image is everything, when the body is exalted in commercial and empty ways, you can stand out and make a difference. And that difference doesn't begin with grand speeches, but with small acts. With a buttoned shirt where there once was a low neckline. With a longer skirt where once there was a miniskirt. With a sober color where once there was something flashy. Not because someone forced you, but because you've come to understand the sacredness of the moment you are living. Because you've looked at the crucified Christ and said, this is holy. I didn't come to draw attention to myself. I came to look at him. Have you ever stopped to consider whether your clothing helps or hinders your journey toward God? Have you noticed how your behavior changes when you're dressed with dignity and respect? Try it. You don't need to spend money. You don't need to follow trends. You only need intention, a heart willing to let even the way you dress become part of your prayer. Because God sees everything, even that small detail you might overlook in the mirror. If you're willing to be challenged, if you want to live this holy week with greater depth, begin there too. This isn't moralism. It's coherence. Coherence with the faith you profess. Coherence with the love you say you have for Jesus. Coherence with what it means to remember his sacrifice on the cross. I know this topic can touch on sensitive areas. You might be thinking, what's wrong with dressing how I want? Doesn't God see my heart? And you're right. God does see your heart, but he also sees whether what you wear aligns with what you say you believe. This isn't about judging anyone based on clothing. It's about helping you look deeper. The Lord calls us to live with authenticity, and that means your inner life and your outward expression should speak the same language. If you're in a time of penance, of silence, of contemplating the greatest sacrifice in history, doesn't it make sense that even the way you dress should reflect that? Imagine walking into a hospital, a mourning room, or even a funeral dressed as if you were going to a nightclub. Just picturing it feels uncomfortable. Why? Because we instinctively understand that some moments call for a particular attitude, and that attitude is also expressed in the way we dress. We don't do it out of obligation, but out of respect, out of sensitivity, out of common sense. So if we do this for human events, how much more care should we take when it comes to the sacred? During Holy Week, the Church relives the suffering of Christ, his abandonment, his total self-giving. This is a time to lower the volume of the world and raise the volume of the soul. It's not a time to show off, but a time to retreat a little more into silence. Not a time to distract, but a time to walk alongside Jesus on the road to Calvary. And yes, even something as seemingly small as how you dress speaks to that. I'm not saying you should dress head to toe in black, or give up your personal taste. God doesn't want uniforms. He wants coherence. He wants humility. He wants everything you do, including how you dress, to reflect your desire to draw closer to him. You can still be yourself, with your favorite colors, your personality, your identity, but expressed through the lens of faith, through the lens of love, through the lens of reverence. And if you're young, let me say this to you very clearly. You can go against the current. You can dress with elegance and dignity without losing your authenticity. Don't let yourself be swept away by a culture that cheapens the body and turns everything into a display. Your worth is not in what you reveal, but in who you are. Your strength is knowing when to say, I don't need to be the center of attention. My dignity doesn't depend on that. Holy Week is a chance to say that with your body, too. Sometimes we think that to evangelize we need to speak, to preach, to do big things. But often, the most powerful witness is the quietest one. You give that witness when you choose what others don't. When you go against the flow without needing to explain yourself. When you show up in simplicity, even in a temple full of lights and cameras, because your eyes are not fixed on the spectacle, but on the cross. Your clothes don't define you, but they do reflect your choices. And if Christ chose to give his life for you, you can choose, for just a few days, to offer him that small gesture in return. Maybe no one will thank you. Maybe no one will even notice. But God sees. And that's enough. Because living your faith means learning to do things not for applause, but for love, with a capital L. So I invite you, with both tenderness and clarity, to look at your closet, not with guilt, but with intention. Ask yourself, does this help me live Holy Week more deeply? Does this allow me to be a sign of reverence, of stillness, of faith? Or am I just repeating patterns without thinking?